Typically, I have a ton of names for you on the Waiver Wire show, but I literally had to get a shovel out this week to dig deep and try and find several names that you could use for week 6 of the fantasy football season. But after a lot of digging, the Waiver Wire this week is What's up, Headliner Nation? Kyle coming back to you from the Draft.com studios with another episode of the Fantasy Headliners. And typically on this episode, the Waiver Wire episode, I give you 3 to 4 names per position that you should consider using a waiver claim on for the coming week. However, as I said in the intro, this week on the Waiver Wire, it's thin. You're going to have to dig deep to find guys this week that you could use for week 6. Hopefully, you've already established a really good bench, because if you're going to be relying on the waiver wires to stream some guys this week, it could get a little bit dicey. Keep in mind on this episode, 50% is the threshold. If you're over 50% owned, we don't include you. However, for this episode, I've got 6 guys under 50% owned, and I'm going to toss a few others out there real quick at the end of the episode that maybe if you play like in a shallow league or not very many teams, that you could still potentially get your hands on. But without further ado, it's time to jump into it. Let's talk about some waiver wire ads. The first one on this list, Auden Tate from the Cincinnati Bengals, is a guy that a lot of fantasy owners should have ran to the waiver wire and grabbed last week after we found out that John Ross was going to miss some time with a shoulder injury. But luckily enough, only 10% owned in fantasy leagues right now, so there is still an opportunity. If you need help at wide receiver, this would be one of the top guys to add right now. He really hasn't played that bad, and in an offense that has been passing it quite a bit, there's some potential volume for him as well. Over the last 3 games, he has 22 targets, and as I mentioned, John Ross is going to be out a while. AJ Green is still nowhere near returning, it looks like, either. And we did find the end zone on Sunday, so the volume wasn't really there for him on Sunday. Didn't have a ton of looks, but he was still able to find the end zone. And with the lack of receiving weapons right now, that could be a weekly occurrence for him. Baltimore is going to be facing Cincinnati next week, and they're really in the middle of the pack in terms of stopping wide receivers. So they're not a team that I think is really going to shut down Cincinnati, but this is a case where Cincinnati, again, will probably be playing from behind. Lots of negative game script means lots of passing opportunities for Andy Dalton, which means lots of targets for Auden Tate and company. Definitely a guy that I will consider streaming in week 6. A guy that I brought up on last week's episode, Mohamed Sanu from the Atlanta Falcons, is going to make his way back onto this episode again. Only 43% owned right now, and quite honestly, even if you don't have players on buys next week, even if you don't really need to stream anybody next week, Mohamed Sanu is great bench depth right now. The reason for that being is Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, they've been hit or miss for the last couple of weeks. And when you look at the stats, Mohamed Sanu and Austin Hooper have been the most consistent pass-catching weapons for Matt Ryan right now. So, with that being said, Sanu is actually becoming a decent PPR flex play every single week. Over the last 3 games, 23 targets, 20 receptions, 208 yards. Again, not numbers that are going to jump off the page to you, but decent numbers. He's going to get you points in any given week. So if you just need points, Sanu could really be that guy. Like I said, he's becoming a decent PPR option. So you can flex him in a PPR league. You're going to get yourself close to double-digit points every single week. If he can hit 10 points for you, that's great. What's even better, if he can find the end zone and get you upwards of 15 or 16 points, even better. Definitely a guy that out of everybody that's on the waiver wire right now, if you need to stream somebody, he's probably going to be your safest bet moving forward. All right, so we're going to do a 180 here. We just talked about potential consistency with Mohamed Sanu. Let's go to boom or bust with Darius Slayton. Now, Darius Slayton is a guy that I mentioned a long time ago. A couple of weeks before the season, I brought him up on a Deep Sleepers episode. He was the guy that looked like he might get a little bit more opportunity. Now, he hasn't done a ton so far this year because, as I mentioned, he's going to be up and down. He's not going to be very consistent, but he is going to be a big play threat every single game. This past week in week 5, 4 receptions, 62 yards, and a touchdown against a Minnesota team that can be a little tough on wide receivers. 82 yards 2 weeks ago as well against Tampa Bay. So he's had a couple of big games over here the last two of the last 3 to 4 weeks, and a tough matchup next week. A tough matchup next week against New England. So again, not a guy that you're going to grab and throw into your lineup right away, but a guy that you should be keeping an eye on. Maybe you don't use a waiver priority on him this week, but maybe after that against this New England team, when more than likely he'll probably get shut down. Maybe he has one big play or something like that. You might be able to grab him next week as well. But just keep an eye on him, because with this dynamic of the New York Giants offense right now, you've got Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard. Neither of those guys are big play guys that are going to stretch the field, blow past the defense. Darius Slayton can be that guy, and that's why I like taking a look at him, because if you've got Evan Ingram, you've got Golden Tate, and you've got Sterling Shepard, they're all over the place, kind of in the mid, that mid type of area in terms of targets, taking a look at those intermediate targets, intermediate receptions. And then when you get Saquon Barkley back and you've got guys creeping a little bit closer and a little bit closer to the offensive line, you got Darius Slayton, who can take the top off of the defense. Now he gets himself a decent shot at big plays every single week. So again, maybe not a guy that you add this week, but a guy that you definitely take a look at moving forward, because I think as the season goes on, he could have value every single week as a streaming option that can get you some big plays. This is also the second time that Willie Snead has made an appearance on the Waiver Wire episode. Only 2% owned right now. And this isn't a guy that, again, is going to be big numbers for you. Like I said, the waiver wire is very thin this week. Not a lot of guys standing out that you should be running out to grab. But with Willie Snead only 2% owned, so another deep play for you, another guy that's probably available in a majority of leagues. Again, you could flex him in a PPR league. If you're in a bind, if you have injuries, if you have buys, whatever it may be, you could flex him, and he's going to get you some points. And that's what we're looking for with some of these flex plays, some of these bye week injury type plays. We're just looking for points. Help me get some points. Let my studs take care of the rest. Hopefully we can get a win. Let's get these guys back and healthier from bye weeks, and then we'll move forward. So you're just looking for guys that are going to offer you points, and Willie Snead can do that. Right now, he's third on the team in targets, so keep an eye on that. He's being looked at like by Lamar Jackson. Nothing more than a PPR flex play. As I mentioned, he could help this week. There's 4 teams on the bye this week. Keep an eye on that. He led the team in yards in week 5, and he's had at least 40 yards receiving in every single game but one this year. So, again, he's just going to get you points. Maybe he gets you 8 points in a PPR league. All right, that's a lot better than 0, right? We've seen a lot of guys over the last few weeks where we're like, oh, this could be a streaming option. We could get him, and then they put up 0 points. Heck, even some of our studs right now, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio, some of these guys we're putting in our lineups right now, and they're not getting very many points at all. They're not getting double-digit points. So things have been weird. So before you take a look at this and say, oh, Kyle, I would never start that guy, just remember, we just need some points in these bye weeks and these injuries to get through them. We just need points. Some of these guys can do that for you. Willie Snead, another option. As the season kicked off this year, one of our writers here at the Fantasy Headliners, Miguel Chapin, wrote a really good article about Gerald Everett and how this could be the breakout campaign for him. Well, after a slow start to the year, things might be picking up a little bit for him, especially after a huge week against the Seattle Seahawks in week 5. He's had 19 targets the last 2 games, and he only has 1 touchdown right now. However, could there be more volume coming? If he's pushed Tyler Higbee to the back and said, we're not really going to worry about Higbee anymore, because at one point they were basically splitting time on the field. If he's starting to push Higbee to the background a little bit and he gets to step up and be on the field more, that is perfect. He's got games against San Francisco and Atlanta coming up, games that will probably be very close. If they do end up being close, then this is a positive game script for him, one that could lead to a lot of back and forth action, or at least one where the Rams are going to continue to pass the ball. And don't forget Todd Gurley. He's been really pushed back in his workload this year. So last year we would have said, well, Todd Gurley, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, like all these guys. Well, right now Cooper Kupp is the number 1 on that team. And then Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks have been hit or miss. You've looked at a guy like Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley, week in and week out, is touchdown dependent. Gerald Everett could become another guy on this team that's a little bit more steady than the rest, and it would be at the perfect position, tight end, in which a lot of people haven't done great this year. I mean, heck, the last time I checked, there are only 8 tight ends in the league right now that are averaging in half PPR formats 10 points per game. Gerald Everett could be a guy that's starting to come onto the scene at only 3% owned. You could be grabbing him early on in this breakout. I feel like I've been talking about Chris Herndon every single week. Dealing with the 4-game suspension, he will finally be back next week, which is perfect for the New York Jets because they need somebody, and you might need somebody at tight end as well. Chris Herndon, only 12% owned right now. I don't think a lot of fantasy owners realize how good of a rookie season he actually had. Last year, his rookie year, he had the 8th most receiving yards for a rookie tight end since 2010. He was also one of only 6 rookie tight ends to have at least 500 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns in their rookie season. So he had a really good year last year. He didn't get to carry it over to this season quite yet, but he will now. The New York Jets, they have not had anyone consistent. They have not had anyone reliable. We thought Jamison Crowder was going to get a bunch of targets. He hasn't really done anything. Robbie Anderson's really only had one decent game so far. Quincy Enunwa, obviously, he got hurt at one point. We don't know what to think of this offense right now. Sam Darnold might end up being back very soon. If Sam Darnold gets back into this lineup and he's healthy and ready to roll, Chris Herndon is an even better look. Over the next 2 weeks, Chris Herndon gets Philadelphia and Dallas. Both of those teams are in the top 10 of most fantasy points allowed per game to opposing tight ends. Chris Herndon can come back, be ready to play, and can be a guy that offers you good upside at the tight end position every single week. There you have it, Headliner Nation. Like I said, short, sweet, to the point. Not a whole lot of names this week, but those are the top names that I am taking a look at heading into week 6. Obviously, there are some other names out there that you might be looking at. Did they meet that threshold of 50% or not? It really depends on the format that you're playing in, the platform that you're playing on. But these are the main guys that I'm taking a look at. Now, I also mentioned that there might be a few others. So these guys are all over 50% owned. I just want to toss them out there real quick. Chris Thompson, 62% owned. He gets Miami next week. He's a good option to take a look at as well. Ronald Jones, I know we say on this channel, hashtag say no to Rojo, but if you're thinking of taking a dip in that pool, 59% owned right now. Over the last 3 weeks, 9 for 35, 19 for 17, 14 for 80, 19 for 70, 14 for 80. Not a guy that I'm going to trust on a weekly basis, but if you are absolutely in need of a running back, you could put him in your lineup and keep your fingers crossed that he does something better than what he has been doing. Peyton Barber did get that touchdown this week, though. So again, he's still a part of that offense and taking very specific snaps away from Ronald Jones. Byron Pringle, 0% owned. A lot of people are going to ask about him. I did not include him on this because Tyreek Hill could potentially be back next week, if not very soon. You still have Demarcus Robinson. You still have Travis Kelce. You still have Mecole Hardman. I'm not spending a high waiver priority on a guy that had a huge week this week. I know it could be tempting for you to do that, but I would stay away from that if I were you. Too many options there. And then Frank Gore, 61% owned. Singletary's getting closer and closer to being ready, but this week, next week, whenever it may be, whenever Singletary's ready to go, they're really going to throw him out there. Definitely if you're dealing with a hamstring or any type of leg issues, take a little bit longer to get him going, especially since Frank Gore has been pretty productive so far. Don't have the rookie Devin Singletary have a season that's basically wiped out because he's on and off the field with injuries. Headliner Nation, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure that you do that right now. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so anytime we go live, which is Saturdays at 9 p.m., or anytime we drop content, which is every single day, you're going to be notified right when it happens. Also, make sure that you like the video if you appreciate the content, and comment below if you've got any questions. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. Thanks so much, Headliner Nation. I'll catch you on the next episode. Have a good one.